Yeah! Frankie saved Luffy from Saturn in chapter 1095. Saturn tried to kill Luffy, but in chapter 1103, Saturn sees Luffy right next to him, looking like a skeleton, and he no longer wants to kill Luffy. Saturn's entire attention is on Bonnie for some unknown reason. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't Luffy supposed to be the number one threat to the world government, not Bonnie? And all the Marines next to Saturn are waving their guns at Bonnie. Like they held their guns at Bonnie in chapter 1095, and in chapter 1103, they are still holding their guns at Bonnie. And not a single Marine is pointing their guns at Luffy, the greatest threat to the world government. Luffy is completely forgotten. Saturn doesn't give two shits about Luffy. Then Luffy randomly gets food out of nowhere. I'm gonna do a theory video about that later. He starts eating the food, and Saturn tells the Marines, go arrest Luffy. Luffy is literally like 2 steps away from Saturn. He is right next to Saturn. And Saturn tried to kill Luffy literally the last time we saw them together. Literally before the Kuma flashback, Saturn tried to kill Luffy. But now Saturn tells Marines to go arrest Luffy. Why do you want to arrest the guy that you just wanted to kill? That doesn't make any sense at all. But the second plot hole I noticed is even weirder. Turning chapter 1094, turning chapter 1095, when Saturn tried to kill Luffy, literally the only time Saturn tried to kill Luffy, by the way, Frankie saved Luffy. And Luffy is in Frankie's hands. Frankie is literally holding Luffy. Then Saturn uses a weird attack that makes Frankie fall on his knees. We go to the flashback of Bonnie and Kuma. We come back from the flashback. Frankie is in the exact same spot as before. But where is Luffy? Look at Atlas. Atlas is looking at Luffy. Luffy is on the other side, completely on the other side. How did Luffy get to the other side when he was being held by Frankie? Did Frankie just throw him away or something? But Frankie was unable to move. And why would Frankie throw Luffy right next to the Kurosei member? As you can clearly see from this image, Luffy is literally like 2 steps away from the Kurosei member. How did Luffy go from being in Frankie's hand to going to next to the Kurosei member? As I mentioned before, the Kurosei member, Saturn, didn't really care about Luffy at all. He only started caring when Luffy randomly had food to eat next to him. And even then, he was like, hey, you go try to cuff Luffy. Sun God Nika Luffy that you guys have no chance against. Go cuff the guy. I would do it myself, but I'm busy torturing Bonnie right now. I'm very busy torturing a 12-year-old girl. So go deal with my number one threat to the world government, please. Yeah, so go deal with Nika for me. You, a bunch of weak marines, bunch of weak rear admirals. You go deal with my number one threat. Okay?